Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode.
And there's Olivia. I already got kicked out right from the get-go. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show. And instead of saying the wrong number, as I always do, I'm going to wait for my lovely partner in crime here, Tracy, to tell me which episode number it is in the chat, because of course I already forgot. With that said, though, we have a few things to talk about before we get into this. I see Stacy already saying hello to us, so I guess you are looking forward to this episode. Hello, Stacy. She's one of our FDNs as well. I want to shout out two things that are going on. It's episode 434, by the way. So welcome to episode 434. Two things I want to shout out for you guys today. One is an in-person event. The other is a free online event. So let's start with the in-person event. That is HICS 2025. This is the second annual version of this conference. It's hosted by Jeremy Maleka of Biocanic. And they are very great friends of us here at FDN. His wife, Jen Maleka, is not only an FDN, she was the FDN that got me involved in this 8.5 years ago now, which is insane to think about and say out loud, but here we are. So this is kind of our low-key official FDN conference on the West Coast that we do each year. Again, we're not the ones directly hosting it, but essentially it ends up being an FDN conference because we make up over a third of the audience, which is a great problem to have. Now, what they are experiencing this year, which I'm happy for them, but I know that someone's going to come back to me in a few months and say something about this. So I cannot stress enough. I'm telling you guys the truth. This is not some sales gimmick. We would never do that to you. They are going to sell out of tickets. And in fact, the VIP tickets are almost already sold out. So that's how you get to the VIP dinner, which is a separate networking event that's not even part of the main conference. You have to get the tickets now if you would like to attend. Is probably at the rate that they're at, as early as first week of September, mid-September, there are not going to be any tickets left. And within a week here, there's probably not going to be any VIP left. So it's HICS-live.com. That's HIX, a little dash, live.com. And you can use the code SUMMER30. So it's all capital letters, SUMMER30. They're still giving 30% off right now. So that's kind of a no-brainer. I always tell people hotels can be booked last second, right? There's always something available. Rental cars can be booked last second. Plane tickets, they are not fun to buy last second, but they're usually available. We can't make tickets appear out of thin air, so please do not miss it. We have over 60 FDNs and staff members already registered. I'm trying to get that number to 100. So that's a little bit of an expensive event between the tickets and the travel. Here's something for free if you like this kind of stuff. So on August 12th and 14th, you will not see any podcasts from us, and that is because I will be hosting our first Clinical Edge event. And what that is an event solely for our clinical advisors here at FDN. So the clinical advisors are not course mentors. Course mentors are the people that our FDN trainees utilize for additional help with the course. They're great. They're advanced practitioners, but that's who they focus on. The clinical advisors, arguably in terms of knowledge, are even a step ahead of that because they are the ones that help out graduates like myself and Olivia, our guest today, with complex cases. So these people have to do a bunch of additional training. They have to know crazy labs that aren't taught in the main course inside and out. And we are letting you see their case studies for free August 12th and 14th. So I think we have over 6 or 7 case studies planned for you. You'll be hearing from people like Whitney Morgan, Paula Reed, Dustin McFarland, Brendan Vermeyer, Courtney Cowie, some of the FDN clinical advisors you know and love. And if you don't know those people, look them up. They're pretty smart folks. So it's a free event. Check out the QR code up there or go to fdntraining.com. And I believe that's fdntraining.com/edge. We'll get you the link for that. Thank you for listening to my announcements here. Let's get to our guest today. I was very excited to find when we were talking, we actually grew up rather close to each other. She went to a high school probably 25 minutes from where I grew up. And then at one point I actually lived in that town. So it's always just interesting to me because FDN, the bigger that we get, the closer everything gets together. So you might have an FDN in a town near you. Just check it out. Olivia Morrissette is a functional health practitioner and integrative health coach who's passionate about helping young women feel heard, supported, and truly understood in their health journey. She uses functional lab testing and holistic root cause approaches to help women heal physically, mentally, and emotionally. Her mission is to be the cheerleader, guide, and trusted resource so her clients can finally take back control of their health and feel like themselves again. Olivia, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. It's fun to be here.
Cool. Well, if you've ever gotten to hear the show before, you know my first question. And if not, no offense. It's a simple enough one. Everyone that comes on here, like 99%, they didn't get into this work because they were bored. You were not probably back in high school 20 minutes away from me one day. It's just like, oh, I can't wait to be a functional health practitioner. Unfortunately, we're not there yet in the world. It's usually some experiences that we had that led to this. So I would like to know, when did your health symptoms start and what did they look like at the time?
Oh boy. Yeah, they started quite a while ago. So I would technically say they started in high school, but they started to get worse during college. I went to South Carolina. I was in a freshman room dorm, the oldest building in a swampy, sweaty, hot. So who knows what the mold exposure was like there, but it really started sophomore year. I had a friend from high school who passed away, and I started to notice some symptoms coming on after that. So I would get these chest pains, have trouble breathing, would get like lightheaded, have to run to the bathroom. So I did asthma testing, I did heart testing, I did all of those things, and turned out I was having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. So that was a big focus for a while. I took some medication for that. And I loved how in some of the other podcasts you mentioned like having a flotation device and that it being like the flotation device until you can get to the spot. And that's exactly how I, pictured it. And it got me, it floated me through college and through some of those years. But that was kind of just the beginning. So then I started to get these sinus infections at the time. This was around sophomore year of college. And I would get them like pretty much every month. I would go into my, student health center and I would tell them what my symptoms were. They said you had, sinus infection. They would give me the antibiotics, go home, take them. We'll get the sinus infection again. We'll go back. I did this for at least like 3 different semesters of consistently every month taking antibiotics. They would double it or, have me on double doses just to kind of get through it until finally I was like, okay, no, I'm not doing that anymore. So I, let the symptoms go for a little bit, was still having a little bit of troubles. But then when I graduated, that was right during COVID, all the other symptoms started happening too. So I got really bad lockjaw, so really bad TMJ. Turns out the TMJ was basically what all my sinus infections were. It was just the symptoms of the TMJ that was manifesting and having me, have the face, hot and then make me sinus problems and all of that. So then post-college, I got my first big girl job and it was a very toxic work environment. So turns out I had way more symptoms than come on. So I gained about 40 pounds when I was working out my hardest. I was eating clean of what I thought was clean. I had no energy. I was having painful periods, which, I then got diagnosed with endometriosis. I was sore all the time, got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I was having, have to have so much caffeine, so much stuff to get through the day. It was just really in a bad spot. So I kind of went through like all of those different symptoms, but then that ultimately led me to a bunch of different doctors who I didn't necessarily feel that heard. I felt like it was giving me, these labels, but kind of being like, there's nothing to do about it, which I didn't really want to accept that. My mom had always been more into like more natural and like looking deeper into it and not just sticking, a Band-Aid over things. So finally then connecting me with a functional health doctor, which completely changed my life.
Okay. Wow. I was going to ask you, no. Well, you beat my next question because I always like to know, especially when someone is like us and they're on the younger side, we can still say that, which is great. I would like to know what happens that shifts the paradigm or whatever. But it's so funny. It's either like this gut feeling or they had some type of family influence, and thank God, because you always kind of wonder like what the heck would happen if you're experiencing this much relatively early on in life. What the heck does another 10, 15, 20 years do to someone if they're not addressing these things properly? That also probably answers this question I wanted to know, because you said at some point, I think it was preceding college even, that you just said that you were done with this, a lot of the treatments that you were taking. Were you done with it because you had that natural influence? Like plenty of people take treatments all the time and they don't just say they're done with it, or was there side effects with it that was annoying you?
Yeah, I feel like I was always kind of like not anti-medication, but I always wanted to know the other options first. But I think that during college, I was like, I just need something to get me through, classes and finals and all those different things. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to take it now. I'm going to see what happens. But then I was doing it for, 3 semesters and nothing was happening. And I just knew, I just know I should not be taking antibiotics this much. And like something in me was like, there has to be something else. There has to be another way. There has to be something else that's wrong. Like this cannot be it. So I guess I kind of gave up in that sense of like, I just can't keep doing this. This doesn't feel right. But at that point, I still didn't have, the compass to tell me exactly where to look. I just knew I need to put this down because I should not be medications for the rest of my life as an 18-year-old or 19-year-old.
Gotcha. Okay. So you have the mix of the family influence and the gut feeling, which I recommend all people trust. It doesn't mean that you have to do it as a first thing, but definitely something to look into. I also appreciate your transparency and actually referencing something that you're right. We do talk about on the show a lot. This openness and willingness to not be total purists in the functional health space and understand that there is a time and place for these amazing advancements in Western science and Western medicine that can provide us with these life jackets to stay afloat, metaphorically speaking, in these times of need. And I know I'm never going to win this one fully. There's some people that are not going to buy into this. I'm not even saying I represent the views of FDN when I'm saying this per se. I feel like Reed's pretty much on board with this. You learn about this in the course where he talks about the life jacket. I think that's where I got the analogy from. Not everyone in the functional space agrees with it. Not everyone in our own company agrees with it. So I'm just sharing Evan Transu's opinions. But if you've ever met someone, especially with something like debilitating depression or severe anxiety, you go spend one day with that person and actually see what they're dealing with. And you tell me that you would not consider it pros outweighing the cons for them to take something, literally all you got to do is swallow a pill or a capsule. And all of a sudden these symptoms can get dramatically better for certain people. And yes, there are side effects of these things if they're used for decades. But most of them are, in terms of like one dose, a Xanax is kind of safer than going out and having 5 drinks, which, I'm sure you never did in college or anything like that. So a lot of the stuff that these folks in college or just in normal life are doing anyway is substantially worse for your body than something that can dramatically reduce your stress or the symptoms in the moment. Not to mention, a panic attack is like an awful experience in and of itself. So I'm not even just talking about, hey, maybe the side effects of one dose of the medication or just a handful of doses is not that bad. What happens to someone when they're in fight or flight and they think they're going to die for 20, 30 minutes, multiple times a day or every day for a long period of time? That's got to weigh on the body way worse than any medication's going to. That's my opinion. But I just appreciate you bringing that up because I always think it's very validating for individuals to hear that. Now, one thing I want to go back to in your story before we kind of move this along here and hear what you did that worked for you and then what you've learned so far. I just wanted to ask, and I'm sorry that this happened to you. You mentioned that really the first symptoms started when you lost a great friend very early on in life. Now, were you just answering my question literally when I said, when did your first symptoms start? Because by definition, that was the correct answer. But, or do you believe that stressful event not only triggered anxiety, but it might have triggered some other things that you dealt with along the road?
Yeah, I think that instance was the first time. I think it always been, kids, when you're in high school stressful, things like that are stressful. But I think I never experienced stress and trauma until that point in my life, where then I think that everything else from there, not everything else, but it all became a domino effect, right? So like that stressful event caused the panic attacks, which then I think were causing the TMJ and like me holding so much tension in my jaw, which then I thought were sinus infections, were getting treated as sinus infections. So I was taking antibiotics, which antibiotics screwed my gut. So then I was getting IBS and then I was getting all these other things because of the chain effect of that. So I think that was really the first time. And I think it's a valuable lesson to learn, like stress management, nervous system regulation, but I didn't know it at that time. So I think that was kind of like the first domino that fell over, and then the rest kind of all just like twinkled right after that.
Okay. And I asked that because that kind of shows this bi-directional relationship between traumatic things and maybe working on the emotional side of it, but also these very practical things and just the purely biological stuff. Because I think a lot of people end up in one or the other. And we've seen this, right? There's some people that it's only about trauma now, whereas 10 years ago when I got into this fully, people weren't as open to that. Even women who are generally more emotionally intelligent, let's call it, they weren't even as much about that. It was kind of like, okay, if I just do the labs, just take supplements and change my diet, I should be perfect. It's like, well, no, not only can it be both, usually there is some type of again, bidirectional relationship. So for someone like me, realistically, I probably started out in life with gluten sensitivities, other hidden allergies and stuff that we didn't know about, which triggered mental health experiences for me. Now, guess what? The mental health stuff was traumatic. Again, we talked about panic attacks. If you think you're going to die even once, let alone many times with something like that condition, yeah, that's traumatic. So now I have to address both. Where in your case, I mean, I'm guessing here, I don't know if this is actually 100% true, but you could start out with a very valid, obviously, trauma that's leading to these symptoms, but then the treatments and the way that the symptoms got addressed can actually create issues that at the end of the day are only going to be able to be fully healed through kind of a more functional approach. So just for those out there, it's never one or the other. It kind of has this bidirectional relationship, like I said. So, all right, you finally, we'll go back, fast forward here. You get to this first functional doctor, I think you said, functional practitioner, via mom recommendation. So God bless mom over there. What did you learn with this first functional practitioner? I don't know if it was enough to like get you to where you wanted to go, and that's fine if not, but I'd love to know what were some of the insights that you got there, and how is this different than your experience previously, mostly in Western medicine?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I noticed was super different is that she sat down with me and like talked to me about my life. She was like, where'd you go to high school? How was elementary school for you? Did you get bullied? Like just questions that I never, like, I would never think a doctor would ever ask me. And she actually cared and wanted to know about every piece of my life, which I was kind of like shocked and taken aback by. I'm like, why do you need to know this? But then after learning more, it's so important to know that stuff. So that was point one. That was completely different than anything I've ever experienced. And then the next piece was just actually trying to figure out what was going on with me. So looking at blood work differently. I did a body scan. We did some mucosal, gut testing. So I found out I had crazy leaky gut. I was basically depleted in all my nutrients. It was the beginning stages of learning what was going on, but it was the first time that I was able to understand that there was something going on and that someone was able to actually give me answers and talk to me about it. Like she actually walked me through what was happening and educated me versus just telling me that, you have leaky gut. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And what am I going to do about that? So that part was really, really nice. And then I think I saw the benefits from just those little pieces that then I started to look into it myself to say, okay, like, can I do this? Is this something that I can figure out? And that's where FDN came in and kind of just really put all the pieces together after doing the testing with them. It was able to help me finish healing. I got the first stages going there, but then was able to get the rest of the testing and kind of like finish up my journey healing by getting more of these results and actually figuring it out.
It's so cool. So wait, FDN for you, because I know now, obviously, you do take clients and we'll talk about that towards the end, but was that even the mindset going into it? Or were you just like, I want to know everything I can about this. I'm going to take this self-healing route with FDN?
It was like a mix of both. At that point, I was done with my first job out of college. And I was kind of like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I don't feel aligned. I was in corporate sales and I didn't feel aligned with that. And just starting to learn a little bit more about what I was getting done to myself. I'm like, okay, well, I want to know, I'm like the person who I want to know everything about myself. Like I love the BuzzFeed quizzes when I was younger. I love personality tests. I'm like, I want to know everything. So I think then looking into it more and finding a space where I can learn more about myself through FDN and actually be able to help heal myself more. But knowing that could potentially be a career path for me was just, it felt so aligned.
This is, my God, I got to not spend the whole podcast on this. This is so exciting to me because I'm trying to do the timeline right. So what are you, mid-20s, 25 to 27?
I was about 24 at the time. 24.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mean now.
Oh, now, yeah, I'm 27.
Okay. Well, no, because it's just amazing. Like when I did this, and I say this all the time, I'm starting to sound like Reed. I just say the same stories all the time. Dang it. But when I was 21 and I went through FDN, you could not find another 20-something who was even an FDN. Like literally there are Friday call recordings of Brandon Mole, one of the clinical advisors, saying this is the youngest FDN at the time. And now it's like, we have Veda Leclerc out there. She's 22 with, she was on our summer open house, a 6-figure business at 22 years old. Rachel Smith, she just turned 30, but I mean, she had been doing FDN for 4 years in her 20s very successfully. I just talked to someone on the business mastermind the other day, Anne Marie, who's 22. It's amazing and so important, not to mention my wife. She went through in her 20s. So we just have our generation is so screwed. I was trying to think of a better word. I couldn't lie. So yeah, we're screwed. And to have more people out there that have cared enough to not only heal themselves, but to be like, I'm going to actually do this as work, which I imagine is risky. I didn't go to college. So a lot of you guys went to college, you're paying money for this stuff or doing student loans or whatever it is. And then saying like, hey, I'm going to actually try to make a pretty quick shift here. I have huge props for people who do that, because it might seem risky on paper. It's obviously very worthwhile spiritually, but we need more of this. We need as many people doing this as possible, because I think a 20-something's always going to listen to another 20-something that's had similar experiences to them a little bit easier than they might listen to someone who's 70. I'm just being honest. So I'm glad that you had a great experience then with FDN, and it was a huge part of the healing side. When you got the labs back during your time going through FDN, what were some of the main findings? And for those that don't understand that, intuition, you actually included the foundational labs. So you run them on yourself. It's part of the curriculum. So what the heck did you find?
What didn't I find? I feel like there were so many things. My cortisol was through the roof, and it made sense because I was doing HIIT workouts all the time. I was because I was gaining so much weight, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, so I must not be working out enough. But cortisol was through the roof. My gut was so screwed. I had Candida, I had parasites, I had so much overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria. I think from all the antibiotics that I was doing, I definitely just was screwed. My gut lining, I had leaky gut like crazy. I had high histamine. I kind of had all these things, which was so crazy to look at and see it on paper. And it, as much as it sucks seeing it, and that's what I even tell my clients, it sucks to see all these things that might be out of whack and be like, oh, I'm 24 or 25, whatever at the time, and why is all this stuff wrong? But I was so happy to see it. I'm like, hell yeah, I actually know what's going on, and I'm not walking into a doctor's office and they're saying, I don't know, nothing's wrong, or you're good. So it was crazy to see all those things that were wrong, but it was the best feeling ever to actually have the answers and know how to move forward.
Well, and that's the key, even in addition to probably the word happy, it's validating. Right, because you've been I know something's wrong. That's what people don't get. They'll bring up this idea, and it's not often, but sometimes they'll bring up this idea of well, what if the labs, now put something in my head? I thought I was fine, and the lab showed me something. It's dude, no. No one doing our labs thinks that they are fine. They are very aware that they are not fine. And then a worse experience than thinking that you're fine and finding out something's wrong is knowing that you are not fine and everyone invalidates you or doesn't get to the root cause of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
That's a much worse experience.
Totally. I completely agree.
So, sorry, real quick. Cynthia said I couldn't get into the Zoom. Well, I'm glad you're here now, Cynthia. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the Zoom. We do this on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and you have made it officially, it seems. So we're glad to have you here. You can always rewind, actually, even the live portion. You can rewind it if you want to check it out a bit earlier, Cynthia. Okay, so I want to go a little bit more into maybe the GI map side of things, because I know parasites, Candida, all that good stuff are particular interests of yours. So we won't be able to dissect all the labs. I get that today. That would be 2 podcasts at least. But let's talk more about the GI map and the specifics on there. So what were some of the things that came up on the GI map specifically?
Yeah, my Candida was crazy. My SIG-A was so high. I think my immune system was just totally overworked. I had parasites. I had overgrowth of opportunistic. I had low commensals. It was kind of just a mess. And a lot of it made sense too, because I had the things I had the sugar cravings that you get with Candida. I thought I was doing all the right things because I was drinking kombucha at the time and I was trying to have my fermented foods and, doing things like that. But I ended up just feeding that Candida more and causing more issues. So, but it was also something when I went into, I was I know my gut's going to be off. I just didn't know how off it would be. And it was just kind of a mess.
Okay. Now, nowadays you work with women primarily in their early 20s to early 30s, which again is just great. We need more people that are helping out our generation. We need people helping all the generations, but it's man, if you listen to the podcast, I speak in schools, and going back to Central Bucks, for example, which you grew up near, seeing the kids when I was in school, and then all of 10, 15 years later, going back into those schools, you can visibly see it. You can see that half the kids are dealing with something, and you're okay, well, how many kids can I see the stuff that's going on with them? So we need people out here doing this. So what are you finding is happening to a lot of these women in the early 20s and 30s? Because I do find, there seems to be something to this. 80-something% of FDNs are women, despite a young man doing the podcast. It is true that most of the people here are women. And men get sick as well. Women are overrepresented in certain things like autoimmune diseases, but it's not like both sexes aren't getting sick here. So what do you think's happening? Are most women in their 20s and 30s that you're talking to experiencing some type of mystery symptoms and just doing these random things like you were, maybe like thinking that, oh, because I did kombucha today, I'm good to go, or because I had pliables, the 80 grams of sugar that I had in my acai bowl is somehow acceptable? Do you think like they're trying their best, but there's genuine ignorance, or what's really going on?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. That's kind of like how I almost try to market stuff, is because I fell into such the trap of the social media, the influencers, the people saying, yeah, like take this one supplement and I lost 15 pounds, or like, you have cortisol belly, so you have to do this and take this supplement. So I think a lot of women I work with have found themselves really, really interested in wanting to, better themselves and wanting to fix these things, but trying all the wrong things, or just trying things that aren't meant for them. When someone's sharing their experience on social media, that's their experience. We're so bio-individual. So what happened for that person, what was their gut microbiome, won't necessarily do the same thing for yours. And I think that's where a lot of them have come to me now, from also being so defeated by trying these different things and spending money and spending time and, spending effort, or telling me this is the workout you have to do because this is how I lost 20 pounds. And that, if you have high cortisol and you're doing, Orange Theory, that's not going to be the best thing for you. So I think it's a lot of women who really want to be better. And I think our generation, health is so much more at the forefront, right? Like, I think people are so much more concerned about that. It's becoming such a big market too, like a, great market. But I just think that it's hard to understand what information is for you, what information is credible, what information is valuable. And I think that's where a lot of the girls have been coming to me, whether it's been dealing with bloating and trying all the things, whether it's, weight gain, or they think their cortisol is high and they just want to actually know. It's like, it's just things like that. I think people are actually noticing that you can't just take a blanket statement from someone online, but you actually need to, fortunately and unfortunately, you have to kind of get to your own body and figure out what's going on with yourself, rather than taking these, sweeping generalizations.
It's a real shame too, because obviously there are gimmicky people, but I always think that that's the minority. That's not what the majority of people wake up every day and try to do. So it's even worse, because there are well-meaning people out there, influencers. I have friends that do that kind of stuff, that they're sharing their story genuinely to help. But you're so right. From that consumer perspective, it's like, how are we actually getting this information? We're sitting there. The influencer might have taken all this time to put this perfect post together, try to give you as much detailed information as possible. And realistically, you saw it for 30 seconds while you were scrolling before you went to bed. And so then tomorrow you're like, oh yeah, maybe I should try. What did that person say? And you have like half the information. You don't even know if it's for you or not. So it's a bunch of well-meaning people, but I can understand why that information gets really disconnected. Do you find then, because you said that you're almost marketing this way to kind of help people break through that. Do you find then that it's tough for people to accept some of the things that we're saying, like with the parasites, Candida? You already knew that your gut might be a mess, for example, but like when you tell, an early 20-something who thinks that they would have had to travel out of the country or whatever to get a parasite, which is totally not true, does that kind of blow their minds? Do they understand that?
Yeah, I think in some ways it does, but I also think like now with like TikTok and algorithms, like people are talking about cortisol more than ever. So I think they have more knowledge about these things, I think. So they're kind of already a little bit bought into it, or a little bit understanding of some of it. And I think a big piece of what I try to do, and what I loved my first doctor, and what I was looking for all these doctors, is educating them on stuff. So I'm not just saying, oh, you have a parasite, whoa, crazy. Like, I'm actually telling them what that means, telling them, where it could have came from, telling them, what we're going to do and what implications that means. I'm kind of going into it more. So I think that they've resonated with it so much more, actually understanding the information, versus just like, seeing the crazy ones online with like, oh, people doing the parasite cleanses and showing, their poop or whatever. So I think it's somewhat shocking to them, but then I think we also, I really walk through with them to try to take like any of the scariness that might, or like, the fear of it, to try to get that out of it there.
I'm going to ask a question here, almost admittedly for the FDNs, for people that are even trying to break into this market. Again, like I was just talking to that woman, Anne-Marie, the other day, and she's just about to start her journey. She recently graduated, so she's probably trying to figure out how to break through the noise. So if you know offhand, what do you think it really is? And maybe it's a collection of things, but what do you think it really is that does allow someone to take the time to get on a call with you and then eventually decide to purchase something? Because I'm thinking about this from both ends. Like, one, it's amazing that you do offer them some clarity, but two, these people, they have to have like analysis paralysis. There has to be, admittedly, a lot of skepticism, right? If you're open to this natural side and the first supplement randomly that you take or the first protocol that you do does not work in the way that it was marketed or expected to work, I can imagine that being very discouraging for people and even perhaps raising their level of skepticism. So what do you think you're saying differently that allows someone who has tried all this stuff in Western and functional to be like, oh, somehow that's my gal, I want to talk to her?
Yeah. I honestly think it's from sharing my own story. Like, I just kind of shared, a blanket one today, but I think that's what people are looking for. I think that's especially like for females my age. You're not saying that, a lot of like older men doctors aren't, great and amazing and have amazing bedside manner, but it's a different type of relationship and understanding for a girl who understands. I've seen the TikToks that they've seen. I've, been to the college and I've, done all the things that they've done that I felt some of these things, and I've dealt with the bloating and dealt with the having to unbutton my pants after dinner. Like, I've had all those things that a lot of these, people that I'm working with are dealing with. So I think them hearing my story and seeing that someone like myself was able to, lose the weight, lose the inflammation, have energy again, and do all these things, I think they can relate to that and can trust that more than just someone who's, I don't know, just kind of spewing out random stuff. I feel like the most posts that I've gotten most engagement with, or that I've seen clients come to me after, have been the ones that I've shared my stories or share my lab results and say like, hey, this is what happened for me. And I've high cortisol and I was working out and that's why I was gaining weight. Like, things like that, I think is really helpful for them to see someone and a lot of us, right? We want to like see someone that we can relate to. So I think that's where a lot of the girls I work with have had similar life paths of me, or just similar, things, because I think they can see themselves in me and I can see myself in them. So I think that's why I feel like I'm getting more buy-in, is because I'm sharing my own stories and my own struggles.
I was curious, but if I had to have guessed, that's what I would have thought that you were going to say. And like, I can't stress this enough to people. There's a lot of, if there are any other 20-somethings listening today, there's a lot of limiting beliefs, like who's going to listen to me? And I'm like, you can always play that game. You could be 50 and say, well, I don't have any formal credentials. I've been an accountant my whole life. Why would someone listen to me about health type of stuff? It's like, you can always play that game. What someone cannot take from you is the story. And honestly, a lot of the people that end up even choosing to work with people like us, they've already been through the ringer, man. They've already been to 7 or 8 different practitioners or doctors or whatever. So at this point, they are fully willing to consider something alternative, but they need to know that you understand them in some way. And I just think that's great. Like, there's advanced marketing tactics and sales tactics that you can use, but you never need to do any of that stuff. Like, how much of a blessing is it that you can just go on, and if you're willing to be vulnerable, which I know is tough, but still, you get to be authentic. You get to just share things that you've been through, and that can be your ultimate marketing strategy. That can be how you actually get people to enroll in your program. I think ethical business is like the best way to do business, of course, and so that's easy enough. Anyone can share their story, and you don't need to be the best storyteller. You don't need to be the biggest extrovert, because there's someone out there that listens to me when I do webinars and podcasts, and they're like, oh my gosh, that guy's too much, right? And then you might get someone that's a little less extroverted than myself, or than Olivia seems. And, they might like you because like, oh, I just like this person. They're super calm. I mean, think about Reed compared to me, right? Reed's like very chilled, same tone the whole time. I'm on like 2.5x. At speed for just natural talking. So everyone has their cup of tea. Everyone or someone's going to relate to you if you just be yourself and share your story. So I think that's a good lesson there for the practitioners. By the way, we are a little over halfway through. So if you guys have any questions directly for Olivia, maybe you're in your 20s and wanting to get some help with this stuff, or maybe you have a 20-something in your family. This happens a lot. And you're looking for how to connect with them better. That could also be a question you want to throw in. So I want to, again, transition a little bit here. You have eventually, of course, decided for real that, hey, this is what I want to be when I grow up. This is what I'm going to do. We talked about who you serve in terms of the early 20s, early 30s, but what other characteristics might they have? Is there a specific niche that you like to work with, or is it just kind of any early 20, 30 something with mystery symptoms?
Yeah, a lot of it is like I have one of my packages, I call it the post-college cleanup, because that was kind of similar to where I was. I think there's so many females that I work with that it's after college, you're getting your first job, or hopefully you're getting your first job after college, and you're kind of at a loss. Like you were able to make it through college with your metabolism, with how you partied and did all your things. And then when you get out of there, you're like, okay, well, what foods am I going to be meal prepping? Why am I all of a sudden bloated? I'm gaining the weight after college. Maybe my metabolism's slowing down. Maybe something's going on. I just feel like a lot of people kind of get in that lost phase after college when everything kind of gets thrown at you, and whether it's more stress that causes a lot of this. But I feel like that's a lot of the people that I have been working with that have been in that, sweet spot of trying to figure out and wanting to be better, but, post college, but not necessarily, knowing the tools or having the tools to do that. So that's a big part of it. And honestly, like I said, again, it's a lot of girls who had the similar experiences to me, who have been dealing with chronic bloating, who have been dealing with crazy fatigue, who have been dealing with painful periods and weight gain and things like that. So that's kind of how I just market it, because I think if they can feel like they can relate to me, I can relate to them. I think that's like the best partnership. So it's been kind of more of that audience.
That's awesome. I love the name of that. My marketing brain's like lighting up here. I'm like, the post-college cleanup is so smart. And it is a huge, even if I didn't go, I can still understand that it's a hugely transitional period in someone's life where you do kind of feel like, all right, this is where I'm about to take this fully seriously. I got to kind of clean everything up to go to this next stage. So you're hitting them at the perfect time, which is awesome. Do you find, because everything that you've said is more symptomology based, which I find interesting, because a lot of the times FDNs are working with a more specific condition. And that's not to say FDN can't address almost any condition. That's kind of the point of FDN. But from a marketing perspective, typically we'd focus on one. So are you finding that these young women that you work with have other diagnosed conditions, or is it usually just, again, like a mix of symptoms without maybe any formal diagnosis?
Yeah, a lot of it honestly is a mix of symptoms. Like I've worked with some clients who have had Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. 'Cause again, I got diagnosed with those. So I've been sharing my story on those. And again, I have people then who are coming to me with some of that. But other than that, I think that's why it works in your 20s and 30s, because maybe you've been having these symptoms for a long time, but don't really know what they are and haven't actually been like, okay, I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to go to a different specialist to figure out what it is, or to figure out if there's a name for it. So a lot of the people who are working with me are just feeling shitty or have been bloated for a while, having stomach issues for a while. So not necessarily, a name or a title attached around it, but, just not feeling good and knowing that they're 20, 23, 24, 25, 26, whatever it is. And knowing that at that age, as they are now, they should have more energy, have more life to them, feel better. And then we work from that standpoint, but nothing like super specific in terms of like, PCOS, Hashimoto's, just more of like knowing that they don't feel good and knowing that that's not correct.
I'm going to make some of our practitioners listen to this, my friend. I'm like, listen in my head. I'm like, okay, so no crazy weird marketing tactics that don't feel authentic, not even focusing on a specific condition. 27. So don't tell me about, you have to be a certain age or a certain time in your life to do this and still getting clients. So there's always a way to do it. I think it's actually so overwhelming how many people do need it. And I know that I see this through a different lens because I'm working in this every single day, right? Even from a company perspective. But I'm like, shortage of client. Guys, there's too many people. There's tens of millions in America alone that are just waiting for someone like me, for someone like Olivia, for someone like you to be out there sharing your story. Is everyone going to like it? Probably not. Are some people going to like it? Yeah. And then they're going to reach out to you. So I just think it's impressive and cool. And I wish, I feel like you're not overcomplicating things that don't need to be overcomplicated. And I wish more FDNs would hear that. So I'm going to direct them to this podcast. Now, in terms of potential clients that might be listening, because I think what would happen from this podcast, this is just my hunch, what we're mostly going to have is a mom that's listening and saying like, oh my gosh, if I could just get my daughter talking to Olivia, this would be perfect. So when someone works with you, what labs do you like to use? Are you still using the FDN foundationals? Have you modified it a little bit? Obviously, no worries if so. I'm just curious about how your specific work
I definitely modify it. So I do a comprehensive blood work panel on basically all my clients. And then I have 2 different packages, but everything's customizable. I want to make sure it's like fitting for the person. But I pretty much always do the Dutch and the GI map. So those 2 along with blood work. Sometimes if clients have certain, if their main thing is like stomach issues, we'll do a food sensitivity test and a GI map. But those are pretty much the 3. And I kind of adjust them as needed. And once we have that conversation, actually dive deep into what's going on, background, symptoms, all those things. But those are pretty much my 3 favorites.
Now, of course, we test and don't guess for a reason because every test result is different. Even if we think we know what it's going to be, can always throw you off, but I'm sure you work with enough people, you end up figuring out some patterns. So I'm really curious here because I know that you had the Candida issue, and I'm thinking if you're targeting a lot of people coming right out of college, especially, I'm thinking late nights, lots of carbs, maybe binge drinking, maybe not, who knows? Antibiotics for any little pain, right? So of course it's going to create like a breeding ground for Candida overgrowth. So my point is what I'm getting at. Are you seeing any patterns or things that seem to be like overrepresented? Like maybe this shows up, in 70, 80% of your clients, either on the GI map, the Dutch, or the blood work.
I do see a lot of Candida. I see a lot of Candida. Okay. I see a decent amount of H. pylori too. So those I feel like are the main things. And then a lot of times it's the SIG-A, like people's immune systems just are not as strong as they need to be. And a lot of times it can come from, having the foods that you shouldn't be having the H. pylori and the different problems there. But I would say, I see a good amount of Candida, which is, I know it's not fun for a lot of people to see, but I think it's another one that I think is more enlightening to them when they see it, when I talk to them about it and they understand it more. But yeah, definitely.
Anything on the blood work that shows up typically?
Oh, blood work is very, very sporadic. I haven't seen anything like super specific. I think it's also because I don't work with people who are, coming to me for one specific thing. So it's different. I've had people who've come with me with a little bit of kidney issues or gallstone issues. So, it's been a little bit more sporadic there. There's not a crazy pattern, I would say.
No worries. I was just wondering, I do ask this sometimes because again, we learn a set of foundational labs at FDN for a reason. But as we start to work with our target niche or demographic, you do start to find these patterns. And that's why modifying it does end up being appropriate as long as you know what you're doing. And again, you have experience with that clientele. Like, for example, I would not say my clientele has any overrepresentation of Candida. That's not something I always see. But even with yours, right, I can already kind of guess, like, this is probably something Olivia sees more often than not. So most FDNs are going to run a GI map, so maybe it's a bad example. But my point is, when you know something is probably an issue for 70, 80% of people, but you don't know exactly who that 70, 80% is, it makes sense to modify the labs or say, hey, at least we're going to do this one. So
I misspoke on that too. If I could see the blood test, it's always a thyroid. There's always some sort of thyroid dysfunction. Oh. So I would say 85 to 90% of the results I see, there's always some sort of underactive, some piece of the thyroid is underacting. So that's another one, especially with women, is a big issue in positive antibodies. So that's higher antibodies.
Okay. And you said antibodies. Are you running a full thyroid panel? Oh my gosh. You're like changing lives out here because they probably don't even know what that is or why that matters, half of them. And then you're like, we're just going to check this just in case.
Especially for women, especially for younger women, it's so much more important to understand it and have it earlier and be able to catch that. It's so much to do with metabolism and everything else. So yeah, that's definitely another one from a blood perspective that I always run and that I see very much so patterns with that.
I know, I only know this just because I have a lot of friends that are in this space, but I still feel like there's always going to be a disconnect, not in a bad way, but between men and women and what they're consuming and understanding. I feel like there's been a movement, even with women that aren't like super into the functional medicine side of things. They seem to be very hesitant about the side effects and symptoms of these birth controls and IUDs and all this kind of stuff, and rightfully so. We are not, by the way, advocating for not taking certain medications. It's not what we're saying. You got to check with your doctor. I am wondering, though, this clientele that you're working with, do they typically have long histories of being on something like that?
So that's honestly a big chunk of my clientele, too, is women who are getting off birth control for the first time and then wanting to understand where their hormones are. So, and I think as a woman, I think that we should all know where our hormones are. It is way too important. It's way too critical to how our body functions to never know that. So a lot of people who I work with have been on birth control forever, who are completely depleted in their B vitamins and are trying to figure out now, okay, what are my hormones like now that I've been off? A lot of them, myself, I was on since I was like, 13 or 14 with bad periods. And they told me, this is the only way to fix it, basically. And that's a lot of the same experiences I have with people I work with. They've been on for 10 plus years and they're, 26 and have, now trying to figure out what's going on with their, with their body.
This is not the point for today by any means, and again, this is not me discouraging anyone from taking medication. I'm just encouraging people to learn more information. You guys should do yourselves a favor too. If you're currently on it and you have a long-term partner, look up the studies showing that birth control, and this is very well documented, changes who you're attracted to, which makes sense as long as you're on that birth control forever. But if you're planning on getting married and then all of a sudden you're not on it anymore, I can imagine. Listen, Olivia, this is what I know based on that science. I know that is the cause of some divorces. I just don't know how many. Because I'm on something for a certain part of my life that literally we know changes who I'm attracted to. And then during one of the most important phases, which you might get off of it to have kids or something like that, all of a sudden that shifts. One, you're not crazy, right? You were just on a crazy medication. Just something to look into. So I always try to give a little public service announcement with that while we can. Are you also finding too that when these people do choose to stop it, are they starting to see where, I know that you said they want to see where their hormones are at, but are they wanting that because they're realizing maybe how bad they feel when they aren't on the medication? Because I have seen some women that I feel terrible, man. They'll be literally your age, 25, 26. They stop taking this after 10 years. They are wrecked physically when they realize that they're not taking or what happens when they're not taking this.
Yeah, I think some women deal with weight gain, a lot of weight gain. Some women deal with just crazy hormones and just not being angry all the time or just being very emotional. And but some women also are like, I feel great. Why was I not off this, X amount of years ago? Okay. So it's definitely mixed there, but I think also just through, I guess, my own ranting on social media too, I'm like, everyone should know where their hormones are. So I think maybe even just that has kind of put into people's heads, okay, if I get off birth control, I think people have also heard about the horrors of getting off birth control. So I think they're just nervous and want to kind of get ahead of that and be like, okay, well, I need to, I want to stop that, or I want to know what's going on. So I think, I have a bunch of discovery calls with people who then I tell them, okay, let's talk in 3 months when you're fully off and your hormones are now regulated, because they really want to, be proactive. Again, people are way more in tune with their health now. So I think it's kind of a mix of both.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is good. It's encouraging. It sucks to me that so many people are dealing with this kind of stuff. But again, anytime I get to interview someone like you, I'm like, all right, that's one more person out there doing the work. So as we get to the last several minutes here, and that's on me, not on you, take the time for these answers. I'd love to know, do you have any cool client stories that you would like to share, to the degree that you're able? You don't have to mention names or anything if you don't want. But I always think it's important for people that click on our podcast to hear, yes, people like you and I can do it because we love it, we're into it. But other people that do not make this their job can do this as well. So I'd love to know just any particularly cool story that sticks out to you. This woman came to you for XYZ reason. Maybe she's at the end of her rope there, and you literally were the one that was able to give her the answers and help.
Yeah, I had a client who came to me, and she had been dealing with, she's in her late 20s, and she had been dealing with these issues and not feeling like herself since she was 15, and said she'd been to so many doctors, so many practitioners, and after, we ran some of the lab testing, we did our, review where I kind of went through everything with her. And the first thing she said was, thank you. I can tell how much time you spent on this. I've never had this before. And I can tell how much you actually care. And to me, I'm like, that was I'm like, even if nothing happened after that, I'm like, I love that. That's like a win for me, because that's what I want people to know and I want people to feel. And then, coming off that, she ended up losing 10 pounds of inflammation that she could not shake for forever. She is energy again. She's going on hikes now. She's just feeling, and words that she used, she just feels for the first time actually aligned with her body, which I think is such a beautiful thing. And I think it's something that when you're healthy, you sometimes take for granted, but when that's gone for so long, you really appreciate that so much more. And she's, said to me, she's like, I owe you my future. I owe you which is such a crazy sentiment. And I absolutely shows me nothing. But it's just so beautiful to have a story like that and have someone who, my biggest thing is I want to be an advocate for people, and I want them to know that they have someone who's actually listening to them, and to have clients, give that feedback to and feel like, okay, for the first time, I felt like I was listened to and I felt like someone cared enough about me, I think was just exactly why, I'm doing what I'm doing, exactly why people in FDN, I think, get into this.
Yeah, dude, that is absolutely awesome. And I know that, yes, you don't literally or she doesn't literally owe you her future, but there is something to be said about it. People need to think about what you're actually doing here. What we're doing as FDNs, it's like, oh, you're giving someone their health back. That's pretty amazing. It's like, okay, yes, but no one gets their health back just to get their health back. You can numb 70% of health conditions with enough medication, right? Not all of them, right? But a lot of health conditions you can kind of forget that you have if you just take something. When you help someone heal in this way, you are giving them their life back a lot of the times, especially depending on what they were dealing with. When I was 21, my face is unfortunately covered with cystic acne. I have anxiety, I have depression, and all this kind of stuff. I'm not living. You think I'm doing what 21-year-old guys want to do, which is go, talk to women and stuff like that? I would have never approached my wife at the time looking that way. So, and then not to mention it affected my career stuff. I wanted to do public speaking. There was no way I was going to do public speaking looking like that. And so you do give people their life back in a variety of ways. And I think it's actually, I wouldn't wish health issues on anyone, but I do think you get this really interesting perspective after you kind of overcome that hurdle where you have a new appreciation for life. At least I know I do, that has never changed. I know what it is like to be here and it sucks. And then when you realize, okay, this is what it's like when it doesn't suck, there's just, there's a gratitude for each day. And I'm sure you can even relate to that as well, especially with the mental health side. When you're dealing with panic attacks all the time and that level of anxiety, and then that is no longer a thing in your vocabulary anymore, that's the best thing ever. That creates permanent gratitude.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. So final kind of quick questions for you here. I have to ask, we never, ever expect anyone to come on the show and be in perfect health. You've listened before, so you already know I've said that to people. I'm just genuinely curious with all the stuff that you've been through, with the stuff that you've done with FDN, functional doctors, all the experiments you've tried probably. Where are you currently at health-wise? Are you feeling good? Do you have some work left to do? I'd just love to know where you're at.
I feel incredible. Like I'm at the gratitude piece for sure. Like every day, I'm like, knock on wood, I feel amazing. I can make it to 2:00 with energy. I'm still working on my thyroid. That's something that was kind of a later discovery for me. So I'm still working on getting those numbers to really optimal that I want. But yeah, I feel fantastic and just hope to help other people with that. Cause I'm like, I know I've been in the trenches. I get it. So, but I'm doing amazing right now. Knock on wood.
I think it's a pretty good answer. I can take that. All right. If you are someone that follows Olivia and you're thinking now, hey, well, I'd love to go work with her. Or maybe, again, I have a hunch for this one. You are one of the many moms in our community and you're like, how the heck do I get my daughter to talk to someone like Olivia to convince them? Where can we find you?
So I'm Live More Health, LIVMOR Health. It's a play on my first and last name, .com, my website. My Instagram is @LiveMoreHealth. And then I do TikToks and silly ones like that. And that's liv.morr.
Okay, awesome. If you guys are on audio, we'll have that in the show notes for you, of course. And Olivia, our signature question for you today will be this. If we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners, male and female alike, to do just one thing for their health. Out of all the things that you've learned, what's the one thing that you'd get us to do? And just know that can be that you get us to start doing one thing, or you can get us to stop doing one thing.
I think just focusing on that healing doesn't happen through force. It happens through safety. I think sometimes we grip the health journey so tight when we've been dealing with it for so long. We've been trying all these things. I think we can grip it so tight and put so much pressure and anxiety on ourselves to be perfect with it. And because we're going to go back to zero if we're not. And I think that can cause more issues. And I've seen so many of my clients that are, have almost like anxiety around the health journey because they're gripping it so tight, which I think just focusing on the basics, like you need to be able to regulate your nervous system, be in a good spot, feel safe within yourself to then actually be able to have any of the benefits and have the healing that you want.
I hope, remember, guys, this is all live. You can just rewind it, though. But I hope people re-listen to that. I don't know that people understand the significance sometimes of these recommendations. So of all the stuff that you've learned, the protocols, the labs, all those things, that was what she just chose to share with us. Maybe that has a little bit more validity than you think. And I'm saying this as someone who totally has experienced this myself, and I've seen it in many people. Just re-listen to that and make sure you're trying to apply some of those things. So Olivia, thanks for being an FDN. Thanks for doing what you're doing. I'm glad I got to meet you directly. I think we did talk on one time on Facebook because of that meetup, but to get connected is great. And if you guys need someone to help out your daughter, or maybe you are that person and you're like, all right, I needed to hear more about this woman first before I work with her or reach out. I don't know how you could listen to this and not understand that this is a totally genuine person who clearly cares. So